All right, so first off, thank you both for coming on here. My first question is, tell me a little bit about yourselves and how you got started in the disability community. I'll start with you, Jessica.
My name is Jessica Hofstetter, and how I got started in the disability community was through my children. Um, Initially, it was one of my older children, and as we had more children, we actually now have three children that are that have um, s- uh, different degrees of autism diagnoses. So that's really how I got started. And I have a background in special education, and I'm very passionate about public education, specifically, in the areas of behavior and restraint and seclusion, and also removing barriers for individuals and our loved ones, so that they can access and have a quality of life, not only in school, but in their homes and their communities.
Um, Amy, would you like to?
Absolutely. My name is Amy Dickey, sorry, and I'm a family partner. I also have a background in special education. I have three children, all with various diagnoses and different abilities. Our journey into this started with developmental delays, um, with their autism diagnoses, and then due to a lack of access to appropriate services, we found ourselves in the throes of mental health and navigating that system and some many pitfalls within that, which is what led me to becoming a family partner and doing that training. And so now I work to support others with um, mental health, with autism, with navigating special education, with learning how to advocate for themselves and for others.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, tell me a little bit about about the work that you do in the disability community. Now that you're on my screen, I'll have you go first.
Sure, absolutely. So it was through my children, and I feel very blessed that I came to realize the the role that my own personal life played and my own personal childhood and diagnoses played, and the importance of listening to my children, what was important for them, to them, not just trying to advocate for what was important for them. That was a big mistake that I had made and a big shift that I made. And it came to grow me personally and see that my own issues, things that I used to try to hide and not speak on, were actually assets, that it was not less than, it was just different, and that helped me in my support of my children and with my children, as well as the work with others. Um, since becoming a family partner and working with others, I have grown in, I guess, my awareness of how important it is to um, engage with the person that has the lived experience, to let them lead and take the leading role, using their abilities, the things that they've experienced, the direction that they want to head. And so I've tried to take a lot of training on that and really stay grounded in that. Um, and when I first started training as a family partner, I trained about being person centered. And then as I began to work more with individuals, um, I learned that there is a time that you person centered is trumped by identity, right? Like how someone identifies. And so while one individual might embrace their diagnosis or their disability, and that's how they identify. And so it's important to, to respect that. Another one wants to, may be very conscious that I am not my disability, and I want to be seen as who I am, regardless of the disability, right? And so it's really important to meet someone where they're at. And that has been a really exciting journey, like to challenge myself to continue to grow in that area. And it's actually made me a better person. Like, so Jessica and I both had this great opportunity from Community Bridges to be a part of ALPNC, which is the Ability Learning Project, where we are doing advocacy, facilitation of advocacy groups of advocacy leaders. And that's been another, exciting next step in my journey.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, how about you? What kind of stuff are you doing in the disability community?
So I currently actually work as a family partner, and I support families who have children that have mental health diagnoses, IDD, and I help them to access services and supports and access. I apologize, my son just came in. And to access not only services and supports, but getting out into their community. And that is a very important thing for me. Now, in my personal experience, I'm going to pause for just a second.
While she's paused, I'll actually tell you what I meant about my own. So I am neurodiverse myself, but I had never, thought it was relevant because I didn't view it as a disability, and so now that's actually made my journey that much more exciting, like to see it from a different angle and understand really why I'm an outside of the box kind of thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to piggyback off of a lot of what Amy said. The more that I learned about my kids going through this process, the more I learned about myself and my difference in thinking. Well, I don't want to say difference. The requirement that I needed to have, like, adaptability, and so that helped me tremendously in not only learning how to do those things for my own children, but also it helped me learn how to do it for myself throughout the process and to better understand myself even. And like Amy said, it definitely made me a better person. But my primary goal, if a family contacts me or when an individual contacts me, my primary goal is to make sure that first and foremost, their voice is heard. Because I feel like more often than not, and we experienced this with our family, we had professionals and we had people coming in and saying, this is what you need to do. But what they were saying didn't work for our family. It didn't work, so that is something that I really put a very high value on, is this what would work for the individual, and their voice and what their choice is, because that's their life and that's their quality of life. And so, a lot of the support, I think, comes through, me validating that for them, that's their choice, and that's their life, and that's, and they have that choice, that it does not simply have to be, well, this is what somebody told you to do, so you need to do it, and this is how you need to do it. So a lot of times, that's a lot of what I will bring to the table when I am supporting an individual or a family, and making sure that their voice is heard, because that's how they become empowered, and that's how they learn to be loud for themselves, and they build confidence, and it's amazing to watch when you validate that for an individual and say, no, this is how you need it to be, not how anybody else says it needs to be. So I think me and Amy, we share a lot of the same things that we do, and a lot of, and I think almost all of them, to be honest, and the way that we do it. But I would have to say, anything that I do as far as disability advocacy in the community, it all looks so different because it all depends on the individualization of it. But if I had to give one thing that was my primary focus, that's what my primary focus would be, is giving the voice, and building that confidence and the choices.
Mm-hmm. Now, Amy, before I came on, before you came on, Jessica was telling me earlier that you're not a big fan of the word advocate. Can you mind telling me why, and what's your reasoning behind that?
So anyone who knows me knows that I am an advocate, right? And I actually say adversity birthed an advocate. Like, I went to it and became it kicking and screaming, but it was a calling. I don't use the term advocate because I try to approach everything in a collaborative manner, like by helping an individual to feel empowered that they are the expert and they know best what they need, and then help them elevate that voice and try to establish a collaboration, or to ensure that voice is heard, and then if if we have to shift and try it a different way, then we do. It I don't mind the term advocate, because I advocate for what I believe in. It's not uncommon for me to write legislators or to request meetings. It's not uncommon for me to respond in surveys, give my opinion, on stuff, to speak to stuff. And so I do actively advocate. But first and foremost, I really try to educate and collaborate, right? Like, to help people understand and respect everyone at the table. And I think that really comes because most of my story with my children was because I did what I was told versus what I believed in, right? And so the double whammy of putting what was important for my kids above what was important to them, and then doing what well-meaning people told me, and agreeing to it, versus really standing my ground, with them about what was needed, caused a lot of trauma and a lot of problems, and the way I best describe it is, if your barrier or your crisis was a hole in the road and you're walking down, the street and you fall in it, there were a lot of great, nice, well-meaning people, medical professionals, doctors, giving instructions on how to get out or how to remove it, whether, it was a hole or a wall that you needed to climb that was a barrier. But it was not until I met others that had faced that hole or that wall, and that I realized, no, I really am an expert in my own situation, in my lived experience, and me as a parent, and my kids are in theirs. And once I began to shift that focus and grow that knowledge, then I believe I had more success advocating. If you think of advocating, the goal of it being to accomplish it, right? To accomplish what you're needing to get across. But I had that success trying to get others to see that, to see like that this is a better approach, right? That it's really a form of social justice, that you shouldn't be making arbitrary decisions for someone else, that they really should be invited to the table at inception and all the way through fruition, not, like invited later on because you're centered on the person with disability, or centered on, the individuals, and saying, do you like A or B? That's tokenism. Maybe maybe the project even isn't what was needed. Like, is that the problem that they would have told you needed to be addressed? Because sometimes it is, we miss the boat, like trying to help others, but it really is because we didn't find out the direction that they needed, to have, because it's a very individualized thing. And I guess that's the other reason I don't say advocate. Although, there's no denying that I am an advocate. I just don't call myself an advocate, because it's very individualized on what I would advocate for. Like I stand on a person's rights and what I believe to be right. And so that's a very individualized thing. And so it's hard to put myself in a box, that I'm an education advocate or this advocate, because I'm not. I'm an advocate for an individual's rights.
My next question is, what impact does your work have on the disability community? Jessica, if I could start with you, that'd be great.
So I would like to think that my impact means access. It means a voice. And I would like to think that my impact is helping to affect that change. As Amy just said, we should have individuals at those tables from that step one, all the way through, seeing all the way through at every stage. And that is something that I strongly advocate for. But I also do like to think that my impact is causing more of not just an awareness, but also acceptance and, making things more accessible for the disability community, because it can't just stop at awareness.
What about you, Amy? How would you like to respond?
I would like to say that sometimes when you're wanting to improve things and you're working on it, you have to remember to review and go back. Like, why is this even the correct direction, right? If we want to turn the curve, sometimes you have to go back to basics, and we can't assume that everyone knows things. So what I've learned is that we have a lot of people working in their individual ways, in their jobs, as parents, as advocates, as stakeholders, and they're doing a lot of great work. But if they stay focused just on that and not on the interplay, right, of it all, it's hard. It's considerably harder to come up with a just solution, right, that actually will stay alive and move us all forward. And so that, I think, is where I try to make my mark, in that I want people to see it's not just this one-off, or it's not just these individuals, right? But this actually has an impact on everyone, including people that love, support, and work alongside people with, disabilities. It actually is damaging to us all. Inclusion is necessary for all, but with that, you have to have a growth mindset, and you have to be able to realize that inclusion does not just mean inviting someone. It means accepting that they belong to be there, that they actually should be there, and then making them also feel a sense of belonging, and value that they bring to the table. And so that's kind of where I'm at. It's like we have to circle back to the very beginning and see that we can't just do this to check boxes. It's actually better for everyone, because by including all, and it helps us stay in that growth mindset, right? Like of how far we've come, and we need to see that both things can be true. You can be making progress, and you can acknowledge how far you still have to go. Because if you don't acknowledge the latter, you can't fix a problem in which you don't acknowledge, And so you can praise someone for what they're doing and still encourage them to have, a growth mindset to choose better and keep the good work up.
Yeah. My last question for both of you is, what can other people take away from this conversation? How can, how can your work sort of be a catalyst for change for others to do, work in the disability community and support individuals to the best that they can? I'm going to start with Jessica on this question, and Amy, you can respond after she.
I think absolutely what Amy said, we have to look at how we move forward, and, how we acknowledge, that this may not be working, right? But still acknowledge that progress is being made. But I would definitely, if I had to pick a takeaway, I would put it on the value and the individualization. This is not a cookie cutter approach, is not going to work. And that's not going to bring, the highest quality of life to an individual if we're simply, taking that approach. And so my hope is that whoever listens to this, would take that individualized approach, and would definitely nurture individuals in the disability community to utilize their voice, because their voice is very valuable. And to always remember that just as much as everyone else, if not more, they absolutely belong at those tables, and they should be at those tables, and not just to have a seat at the table, because their opinion and what they have to share and bring to that table is valuable, and it is needed. So that's my hope. If somebody was to take away something from this, it would be those things.
Mm-hmm.
Can I piggyback that, like with that question? Do you mind?
Yeah, you can answer. Yeah, you can piggyback with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right. So one of the things that Jessica and I've talked about, and one of the goals that we have and have had personal success with, is we have learned how to navigate the system. We have learned how to engage at higher levels, to serve on boards, to get on committees, and to elevate our voice. One of the problems that we've identified in supporting and empowering others, though, is that even when you believe that voice has value, that voice, we're making efforts to hire individuals, like peer support, to be really intentional in these areas. We have to remember that just like any expertise, just like any value, it should be respected with pay, right? People should be paid for their time and their expertise, and also it needs professional development, not just the original, training to do something and to hire something, but to actually be able to give a growth path, pathway to that individual, right? And as stakeholders, they have different trainings. They're able to move up in their career within their different silos that they all work. But when you're talking about individuals with lived experience and those who support them, we have to learn how to navigate all of their silos. We have to learn how to navigate Medicaid. We have to learn how to navigate education. We have to learn how housing. We have to learn all of them. And so we become experts in, a lot of different areas, but yet there isn't necessarily professional development that can help you, translate that into your career, or that can move you forward. There isn't enough intention with regard to, okay, now we have empowered you to become an advocacy leader, an individual, that's going to go out and share their voice. Your story, what you're going to ask, right? But did we give you the professional development of what does it look like to serve on a committee? What is the difference between engagement, advisory, decision-making, rule-making? Did we give you those things? I think that we need to be more intentional with that. And that's a conversation that Jessica and I have a lot and are really hopeful to get off the ground this year.
Yep, that's cool.